Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech, protected.
The following is independently produced programming. The views and opinions expressed are those of the producers and do not reflect the views and opinions of Falls Area Community Television, our staff, or board of directors.
Secrets in the shadows, lost and found. Truth in every echo, loud and clear. Keep on with the long road, no more fear. In the halls of power, whispers grow. Every secret crack beneath the undertone. Our stories hidden in the dust. On this long road, in the truth we trust.
Welcome to the Long Road. My name is Chris Roberts, your host. I'm glad to be back after the Christmas break. A lot has changed in the world. A lot has changed in the United States in the last 3 weeks. Our president, for some reason, who decided that he was going to run on taking care of America first, has really got really power hungry with our military. He's taken over Venezuela. He's telling Cuba they could be next, maybe joking or talking about Marco Rubio, quote, taking over Cuba, maybe going into missile strikes in Mexico and Colombia. Just before I came here, I looked, it stated that President Trump had said, hey, we're either going to buy Greenland or we're going to take it. Wait a minute. You know, we've had individuals like Hirohito in Japan. We've had Hitler. We've had other individuals that have been classified as war criminals and either committed suicide or were hung for what the president is doing. Military intervention in sovereign nations. This isn't like the 16th, 17th century, where if I'm Great Britain, United Kingdom, or if I'm Spain, I can just go in and take over the country or the area. No. We do have some rules of law, and I don't think the rules of law are being followed. And I think I sit there and I watch, and the show is about Venezuelan oil and the effect it's going to have. There could be a lot of negative effects where President Trump says, hey, we're going to send our oil companies down to Venezuela, and Venezuela oil is just going to be pumping like crazy. We're going to get 30, 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil, and we're going to bring it to the United States and sell it, and I am going to divide the money up between what is best for Venezuela and what's best for the United States. 50 billion barrels of oil before we go into the other part. That's 4 days of pumping in the United States. The United States pumps about 52 to 55 million barrels every 4 days. So while the number looks really big, it's a dribble. And I think to really get going on before we go to Venezuela, I've got this article here, the Council on Foreign Relations, top-notch think tank, more on the conservative side than on the liberal side. Trump's return to office propelled by a seamlessly isolation promise, but the U.S. capture of the Venezuelan president illustrates the White House growing fondness for military intervention revealing a striking strategic incoherence. When we're speaking of incoherence, the President of the United States has given Iran 24 hours to stop killing people who are rioting in the country. Otherwise, he's going to go after them. And it also showed that 3 U.S. destroyers with the capability of launching missiles into Iran is on the way. I do not agree what happened to Iran, but to digress a little bit, if you go into history, it was the United States, the CIA, and Great Britain who overthrew the elected prime minister of Iran. Why did they do it? Because Iranians had this ungodly desire to own their own oil. Oh, wasn't that just about 6 weeks ago? Oh, the Venezuelans had this ungodly desire to own their own resources. And so we put the Shah in, and then the Shah was overthrown by the religious people, mullahs, in 1979. Now we're talking about having a supporting uprising so the Shah's son can go back in and take over and create a kingdom. Well, to get back on, President Trump as a politician, he is a great salesman. He sold a lot of stuff. He told the mega people, the other people, what they wanted to hear. And they bought it off big time, and they got him elected president of the United States a second time. He gets elected president of the United States second time. Go to Drudge Report, or go to a number of news outlets. You will see that the president of the United States is throwing the finger to some workers. Well, he's throwing the finger to his MAGA supporters because he doesn't need them anymore. They can't help him. They can't elect him. And he's counting on them. There's no way they're going to vote for those commie, socialist Democrats. You have no choice. You have to listen to me, and you have to vote for who I tell you to vote for. Well, when you go in, there's over 80,000 troops stationed in Europe. We have troops across Asia, across Europe. We have troops in the Middle East. Trump has bombed Iraq, Iran, Nigeria, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, Venezuela, alleged drug boats in the Caribbean and the Pacific, and then vowing that the United States will run Venezuela. Trump has suggested that Colombia, Cuba, Iran, Mexico, or Greenland could be next. In practice, this is imperialism. You know, the Great White Fleet in the 1890s? No, this isn't isolation. This is imperialism. This is about a man, in a lot of ways, is no different than Putin. Putin wants power. Putin wants to expand his Russia. Trump wants to expand the United States. Trump's America's First doctrine emerged primarily as a response to the economic and strategic overreach free trade, automation, and immigration, which took a heavy toll on working Americans and were causing a lot of Americans to fall out of the middle class. That's what Trump told the people. I am going to take care of you. We've spent 25 years at war. We've increased the deficit by over $30 trillion. Americans are not getting paid well. Car manufacturings and other ones are being replaced by automation and robots. We're being undercut by prices overseas. I'm here to stop Americans from getting screwed over. Well, how did the art of the deal work out very well for Americans? It isn't working out very well for the Americans, and it's only getting worse. He complained about forever wars. He promised the American people he was going to put an end to forever wars. Not only has he attacked different places that weren't attacked before, he has come up and said, you know that $1 trillion defense budget? That is too small. I want a defense budget of $1.5 trillion next year. $1.5 trillion. So if I'm spending $1 trillion, and I've been doing it before I started the forever wars, it was about $300 billion. And because of the wars, our annual went up to almost $1 trillion. So now he wants to increase it by 50%, or $500 billion in 1 year. What do you do with $500 billion in 1 year? If you're making weapons, you're going to use the weapons. If you're spending all this money, you're going to get rid of ships and airplanes and tanks that are still highly effective. Throw them to the boneyard so you can build new ones. And the cycle goes on, and the defense stocks are going through the roof. The forever wars in the Middle East that produced little goods, many Americans felt that Washington was squandering blood and treasure abroad at the expense of prosperity and well-being at home. The public wanted that money to be spent here in the United States. Well, that ain't happening. That money, we're being told, is not enough money. We need more money, and it's not going to be spent in the United States. Trump wants to turn back the clock, reinstate isolationism, protectionism, and the immigration playbook that the United States embraced before World War II. But Trump can't deliver. Trump hasn't delivered. This isn't 1930. This isn't 1915. This isn't 1890. The world has changed, and it's not going back. Brazil is an economic powerhouse. Brazil has its own economy, its own oil, its own agriculture. Brazil is not a backward colony of Portugal. Okay? Brazil's getting the point it doesn't have to depend on the United States. Okay? Countries in Africa are growing. They're getting more prosperous. They do not have to depend on imperialistic nations like the Belgium controlling the Congo, France and Spain controlling Northwest Africa, Great Britain controlling South Africa and Kenya and Indonesia and those companies. Those are separate countries. No longer are we going to war with the Boxer Rebellion or whatever because we do not like the fact that the Chinese emperor doesn't want his people strung out on cocaine and heroin all the time. China is an economic powerhouse. China has a billion people. Yes, China does not have to count on United States trade. India is no longer owned by the United Kingdom. No longer can the United Kingdom say, you know what, we're taking all your salt or we're taking all your rice. We don't care if millions of people die because of no food, but we're taking care of Great Britain. India still has a lot of backward areas, but India is producing some really great entrepreneurs, really great engineers, chemists, and scientists. The world is not the way it was even back 80 years ago. It has changed. And so Trump can say, yes, we're pulling out of all this. But you know, what happens if the world calls up bluffs and said, hey, yeah, it may hurt us, but we'll get over it? Excuse me. We'll find a way to work among ourselves. Maybe we don't have all this extra stuff. Maybe every house doesn't have an 80-inch TV or 2 cars or fancy cars. Maybe we'll downsize, become minimalist, but we'll have our freedom and we'll have a quality of life. President Trump's all upset because of the BRIC nations. Oh, Trump saying no. China, South Africa, Brazil. No, Russia. You have to use the American dollar. No. Yes, Bretton Woods after World War II, which made all the world revolve around, operate on the US dollar. Well, doesn't happen anymore because the rest of the world was so damaged, they had no choice. They had to depend on the US dollar. Trump wants the rest of the world to still buy oil in dollars. China is saying, hell no. I'm not buying oil in dollars. India, part of the BRICS, saying, no, I'm not buying oil in US dollars. Yes, US dollars are up there, but the usage is getting lower and lower. Trump's national security strategy, sometimes called the NSS, it goes and it says, after years of neglect, the United States will reassert and enforce the Monroe Doctrine to restore American preeminence in the Western Hemisphere. The Monroe Doctrine went back to 1803. The purpose of the Monroe Doctrine was to keep basically Great Britain out of the Western Hemisphere. Yes, you had Spain, you had Portugal, you had France. But England had basically beaten out France. The Monroe Doctrine was a little bit after 1803. 1803 is when Jefferson bought the Louisiana Purchase. But the idea was, okay, France is out. We've got the United States, and the greatest threat to the United States is the United Kingdom, Great Britain. And the idea was to keep the United Kingdom out, keeping Spain and Portugal from expanding, and keeping in the other European country who may think of coming into the Western Hemisphere. Well, it worked pretty good because, wait a minute. So if it's 1815, 1820, I'm going to have a pretty big fleet to bring soldiers and other stuff into the United States. I mean, the Western Hemisphere. And we got weather, and it's going to take a long time. If we bring them in, if you decide, well, I'm going to bring 100 ships and 20,000 soldiers from England to, say, Central America, which they did, and you had French Guiana and things like that, which one of the different names was Honduras. United States would be in a situation where they would be so close they could provide enough firepower, enough military action to really cause damage. And France or Great Britain or one other ones, they wouldn't have the ability to reinforce them in a timely manner. The Trump coronary coerces neighbors to prevent mass migration to the United States, to cooperate and fight against narco-terrorists, envisions a hemisphere free of hostile foreign excursion or ownership of any key assets. Trump also wants to annex Canada, which the United States tried to do repeatedly in the 19th century. He also wants to own Greenland, which Secretary of State William Stewart eyed in 1867. He wants to control the Panama, as the United States did in 1904. Trump's military intervention in Venezuela harpens back to 1898 when the United States took control of Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and other Spanish possessions, turning the American Republic into an empire. Trump promises to reinstate the Monroe Document and focus UN strategy on its own backyard, coincide with a desire to detach the United States from entanglements farther afield. The days of the United States propping up the entire world order like Atlas is over. Trump seems to long for strategic immunity of an era where hemisphere isolation was about preserving the national security that came with a wide flanking ocean. National security. You care to take how long it would take a supersonic missile to, say, get from Russia to the United States? If we have a missile going, say, 6,000 miles an hour, and the Atlantic Ocean is about a little bit more than 3,000 miles, one of these hypersonic missiles, the oceans can no longer provide security. United States can no longer say, we're controlling North America, Central America, and South America, and we're going to control oil, rare minerals. We're going to control all these assets. Let's see. In the late 1800s, when you looked at Brazil and you looked at Puerto Rico and Cuba and Venezuela, Colombia, they weren't very long very far from gaining their own independence. They weren't very far about starting educating people and start giving people skills. For the longest time, under especially Spanish and Portuguese rules, it was either slave labor or manual labor, with almost like sharecroppers that we had after the Civil War. Sharecroppers that we had in the 1910, the 1920, the 1930s. Sharecroppers, oh, hey, I'm going to give you part of my land. You can produce crops on it. You have to give me 50% of all the crops you produce on it. And oh yeah, you have to buy your seeds, your supplies, and everything off of me. I know you can't read or write, but trust me, I'm going to put down the right numbers. And oh, wait a minute. Crop comes in. I get half the crop. Don't worry. Trust me, I will do the weighing, and I won't screw you over, and I'll go to get a good price for you. Oh. And I'll just read. Oh, that worked out to 80 cents a day for all this. Oh, you know what? Oh yeah, by the way, after this is all done, you still owe me money. And I'll be collecting interest down it. And hopefully you'll have a new crop next year. And oh yeah, by the way, don't try to leave because it's against the law and the sheriff will come after you. Even if we stayed right in the hemisphere, it doesn't protect us from ballistic missiles. It doesn't protect us from cyber attacks. It doesn't protect us from climate change. The NSS says America will always have core interests in ensuring the Gulf energy supplies do not fall in the hands of an outright enemy. The Straits of Hormuz remain open and the Red Sea remain navigable. And the region not be an incubator and exporter of terror against American interests of the American homeland. Trump's yearning to turn back the clock, but the inability to do so manifests in other policy areas. His administration seems to pine for the days when the United States was populated principally by white Christians. His policies renaissance strongly with anti-immigration legislation of 1924 and the mass deportation that occurred between World War I and World War II. Trump's tariffs, which we're all paying for, wants to reinstate the industrial era and turn the nation back into a manufacturing powerhouse. The company will pump more oil and do what needs to get raw materials from Venezuela, Canada, Greenland, Ukraine, and other countries. Okay, look at that. An industrial powerhouse. Go back and study, or go back and review the industrial period of the United States. Go back and look what it was like to work in the mills and the factories before World War II. you weren't making very much money. There wasn't American middle class. There was small, but not much. Over 80% of the people who went to school were supposed to school to learn to become factory workers. You were not supposed to improve. We were supposed to have generation after generation of low income factory workers. Henry Ford decided, I'm going to pay my people $5 an hour. Or $5 a day, I mean. And people go, why are you going to pay them $5 a day? Because I want them to buy the cars that they're building. Okay? The only reason we got a middle class, we got health care, we got quality education, and all that was because of World War II. So many women were given jobs. So many blacks and other minorities were given jobs. And a lot of them, while they lost their jobs through bigotry and discrimination after World War II, a lot didn't. Men came back from the service. Men who joined the service with 4th and 6th grade educations, got skilled or got college degrees. And so basically from 42 to 73, we were the only game in the world, and America prospered on it. But around 1973, the game reverted back to the way it was before World War II. And that's what the president and his people want to bring us back to. And I've got this thing that always irritates me. And I don't know why people do it. Even when I was in the State House and stuff, here it is, you got the president, I don't care if it's the president, governor, Speaker of the House, the Senate leader. Why do all these people stand in the back like stooges? So I look at here and I see Stephen Miller. I see the Secretary of Defense. I need the Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. I see the Secretary of State. And I see another secretary back here. All standing behind the President of the United States, not saying a word, knowing that the President of the United States is not telling the truth. He may be telling part, but he isn't saying the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And in certain ways, he could be breaking international law, or he could be committing war crimes. And they say nothing, and they stand right behind him, coming across as loyal followers. I wonder how many military generals or colonels or admirals or Navy captains would follow the president or the Secretary of Defense's orders if that order came down to invade Greenland and it could cause and result in the death of people on Greenland, especially indigenous people. How would the American people feel if their sons or daughters ended up getting killed in the attack? I don't think they care. Okay, oilprice.com, January 13, 12 o'clock, yesterday afternoon. Headlines: despite Trump's pledge to hand U.S. firms control over Venezuela oil sales, major oil companies remained worried due to the extreme political risks. What gives the United States the right to go into another country and say, we're taking your natural resources and we're going to use them the way we saw fit? President Bush, when he attacked Iraq, said no problem at all. The Iraqi oil will pay for this. Looking kind of back in 1990, 1991, where America made money on the Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, that's because countries paid us. Oh, just because Saudi or Egypt or these countries sold oil to give us money doesn't mean oil was paying to fund that war. What President Bush, baby Bush, found out, taking a country's resources to fund you waging war against them is illegal under international law, and it could be under a war crime. You could find yourselves at The Hague. That was ruled illegal because we used to do that. Countries, European countries, Western civilization countries would use that. We got strong and powerful by raping resources, natural resources, and labor from a lot of countries now. Venezuela oil is mostly extra heavy crude. I can't pronounce the belt. It's a belt area. It's in the middle of Venezuela on land, where break-even costs are above $80 a barrel. When I came in today, oil was $56 a barrel. Oh. U.S. oil companies, they don't own allegiance to Mr. Trump. They don't own allegiance to the United States. They own allegiance to their shareholders. And if the CEO wants to do something different and it's costing the shareholders money, they will strip him and vote him out of his job. They may like him, but they like money more. Oh yeah. Really, for the last 20 years, the infrastructure of the Venezuelan oil nosedive. A lot of stuff is in there, hasn't been upgraded. Venezuela was doing about 3.5 million barrels a day. Now Venezuela is down to about 800 million barrels a day. No, 800,000 barrels a day. And so, a rough estimate, it would take at least 10 years to get them up so they can produce their max capacity. And it would take at least $10 billion a year. And so over that 10 years, it would cost over $100 billion to do that. Who's going to pay that? Is it going to be the American taxpayers? And they're going to do it for the oil companies so the oil companies can get the profit? Or the oil companies going to take $100 billion of profit out of shareholders' pockets? $100 billion of dividends? So I'm the CEO, I'm going to go of Exxon, and I'm going to go to my shareholders meeting and saying, well, you know what? We're going to reduce dividends by $10 billion a year so we can invest it in Venezuela. the international court may say that is wrong. Or the other countries may sanction any oil coming out of Venezuela, and so it would have to come to the United States. Yeah. Last week, President Trump announced that Venezuela interim authorities will turn over up to 50 barrels of oil to the United States. And then he declared his administration will control Venezuelan oil sales indefinitely. Okay, it's going to take 10 years to get it going up to today's standards. 10 years. Anybody put a wager on Mr. Trump being alive 10 years from now? He'd be 89, 90 years old? The odds, based on his weight and health and everything, that's highly unlikely. I don't think there's going to be any insurance company that would give him a good policy based on that he'd still be alive when he's 90 years old. Second, his administration, wait a minute, not the United States, but my administration will control Venezuelan oil sales indefinitely. Next week will be the 1-year mark of his administration. So that would leave 3 years. So that's 730, 1095, add a leap year, 1096. So Mr. Trump has less than 1,100 days left to his administration. If his health stays good enough that he can stay in, as long as we don't have the crap that we have with Biden, 1,100 days. His administration is going to last less than 1,100 days. Trump says we are going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and stop making money for the country. Again, the President of the United States cannot order these oil companies to go into another country, build roads, take care of all this stuff, drill, bingo, and say, we're going to make money for the country. He never talked about what is the return on the investment going to be for these oil companies. Is the return on the investment of the oil companies going to be like Shell and Texaco when they were drilling in what's now Saudi Arabia, the other Arab countries, and paying like 50 cents or less than $1 a barrel, while the United States and the other European countries made millions? So that is being talked about. So he can't go in and say, I'm going to guarantee you, U.S. American oil companies, I'm going to guarantee you 15% profit on every dollar you invest. Can't do that. Second is, it may take 3 or 4 years to get everything in, build the road so you can get out, build the electrical lines, all the stuff that's needed. And oh yeah, Mr. Trump won't be president anymore. And if you invested all that, Mr. Trump can't guarantee you there won't be revolutions in the country because people are going to fight to defend their country. People are saying, hey, we don't want imperialistic colonialists in our country. We have weapons, we have ways to fight that our great-great-grandparents never had. Until Caracas has a new government capable of gaining the confidence of international investors, banks, oil companies will be reluctant to make any major commitment. The CEO of Exxon, Darrell Wood, said after he had his meeting with Mr. Trump, we have had our assets seized twice, and so you can imagine a re-entry a third time would require some pretty significant changes. Most of the oil is contained in the, I'll call it the Old Belt, a vast territory in eastern Venezuela stretching about 600 kilometers, almost 400 miles from the east and 70 kilometers from north to south, with an area of roughly 55,000 square kilometers. You can bring that, say, 35,000 square miles. And guess what? That oil is owned by the Venezuelan oil company, where the people like Chevron and Shell and Phillips, they're offshore. Just maintaining Venezuelan oil production at its current rate will cost $53 billion over the next 15 years, as per estimate by Rystad Energy, a consultant firm. Raise it above the 1.4 million barrels a day would likely require another 120 billion between now and 2014. So basically, looking at it, adding all these stuff, between the next 15 years, you could be looking at $250 billion just investment. And so when Trump was running for president, he was going to say, drill baby, drill baby, drill baby. We're going to get you drill. So, hey, you know what? Cancel those solar projects. Cancel those wind projects. We're going to drill, 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 and we're going to keep coal-fired factories open. We're bringing the United States back to the way it was in the 1800s, the 1900s. Coal and oil. Coal and oil. None of these other things. So let's see what that does. Because I just said that to use oil from Venezuela, the break-even point, it's $80 or more. And oil is at 56. And I'm going to say, since President Trump has been drill baby, drill baby, drill baby, yeah, the price of gas is going down, but anybody who lives in New England, the price of heating oil is going up and still going up. Between my first tank of oil in September and the one I got last week, over 30 cents a gallon up. Oh, 200 gallons, that's $60 extra. So, U.S. frackers were already facing a global oil supply gut. That Trump's Venezuelan dream could make it worse. U.S. shale producers were already contending with oil prices at a 4-year low. News that they may face a significant competitor in their backyard probably wasn't how frackers want to start off 2026. Over the last 20 years, the U.S. fracking industry has built itself into the main driver of domestic oil production. In 2023, 64%, basically 2 out of every 3 barrels of oil pumped out of the ground was by fracking, injecting water and other fluids to force the oil into the ground to force the oil out. The average production levels of 13.6 million barrels a day. United States is the world's largest crude oil producer. So, fracking produces about 10 million barrels a day in the United States. The United States uses about 20 million barrels a day. So even if we got 50 million from Venezuela and got to use that, that's 2.5 days. It will take years for Venezuelan production to ramp up, limiting the near-term impact, but Donald Trump has made clear he wants the firms to move quickly. Development comes at a difficult time for the industry, which is being pressured by the global glut of oil. Higher supplies come from unwinding of the 2023 voluntary production cut by some members of OPEC and growth in non-OPEC countries, including Argentina, Brazil, Canada, China, Ghana. It's like, we weren't counting on these countries. And it's not even taking Russia. Because they understand. Oil prices have been trending down since passing $100 in 2020 when Russia invaded Ukraine. With supply overwhelming demand, West Texas intermediate crude oil futures agreed rate for assets to be brought at a later date are $56 a barrel. The forecast price ranges between $56 to $57 a barrel into June 2028. Fracking is expensive, so the industry will not welcome more price pressure. The economics of U.S. oil production, when oil is above $57 a barrel, are troublesome in the long term. The Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas estimates the break-even for existing wells in both shade and non-shade is 26 to 45. So if you have a well right now producing where you've done mostly all the expensive work, you can make money at between the $26 and $45 range. So on some wells, you got to be over $45. The real good ones, you got to be over $26. But the break-even cost to drill a new well, $61 to $70. So I guess what? A lot of oil workers are losing their jobs. Canada and all these countries, And heavy crude from Canada is cheaper than to process than heavy crude from Venezuela. Venezuelan crude has a lot of sulfur and it has a lot of nickel. But the Trump doesn't worry about EPA. Senator Z's control. What the heck? Who cares about extra sulfur? It may stink like rotten eggs. It may kill you early, but who cares? We didn't care during the Industrial Revolution. Why do we care? But you know what, Mr. Trump? The Industrial Revolution was fueled. Workers were immigrants that poured through Ellis Island and other places. But for the first time, 2025 was the first time in a long time, maybe the first time, that immigration out of the United States exceeded immigration into the United States. So, Mr. President, where do you get those factory workers from? We used to count on uneducated, non-skilled immigrants coming in from Russia, Poland, Bulgaria, Slavic countries, Italy, Ireland. It's not really happening anymore, Mr. President. And before we go, one more thing. I only got a few minutes. Since I've been speaking this hour, the United States spent $1.1 billion it didn't have. See you next week.